first day of the high-level general debate of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly opened this Tuesday under the theme "The Future We Want, the United Nations We Need." Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has denounced conspiracies to commit acts of violence in the lead-up to the December parliamentary elections. Chinese and Indian authorities have agreed to stop sending more troops to their shared border area in order to calm tensions on the ground. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Addressing the high-level general debate of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly this Tuesday, Angolan President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço referred to the current armed conflicts in the African continent, while calling on the United Nations to impartially interpret the underlying factors of domestic political tensions.
In light of the foregoing, the United Nations should seek to interpret, with impartiality, the underlying factors of the domestic political tensions arising from election processes and assume a position that does not ignore the legitimately established government while strengthening their capacity to intervene in resolving the problems to ensure the normal functioning of institutions. Excellencies,
speaking as part of the high-level general debate, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa demanded an end to economic sanctions and the US blockade against Cuba, as well as the right of self-determination of the people of Palestine.
To ensure that no country is left behind, we reiterate our position as the African Union that economic sanctions against Zimbabwe and Sudan should be lifted to allow their governments to respond adequately to the pandemic. We also call for the suspension of interest payments on Africa's external and public debt. The people of Palestine and Western Sahara continue to live under occupation. We repeat our call for an end to the illegal occupation of Western Sahara and for the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. We further call for the lifting of the economic embargo and blockade of Cuba. Your Excellencies, we have no choice but to work together to address the climate change crisis.
Highlighting the social and political breakthroughs in Mexico's history, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador addressed the high-level general debate of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly this Tuesday. He noted his government's strategy to advance social transformations in the country, stressing that combating corruption is a major priority.
Desde hace mucho tiempo venimos luchando
For a long time,
para
we have
conseguir
been struggling
un verdadero
to achieve real
en el
change
país.
in
Y así
Mexico.
lo decidió después de muchos
And
años
after many years,
el
the
pueblo de
people of Mexico decided
eligió.
to do so too.
y nos hemos propuesto
They
llevar a
elected
cabo
me,
la cuarta
and
transformación
I have
de la vida pública
set
de nuestro país.
as my
Ya hablé
goal
de la
to undertake
independencia,
the
de la
fourth
reforma, de la
transformation
revolución,
of the
y
public
ahora
life of my country.
estamos
I've already
empeñados,
spoken about
comprometidos
independence,
en llevar a cabo
reform,
la cuarta
and
transformación de la
revolution.
vida pública del
And now I
país.
am
Sin
determined
violencia,
and committed to conduct
manera
the fourth transformation
logrando.
in Mexico. So what did we
pues
do?
estamos apoyando abajo y de manera directa
From
al
the
pueblo.
grassroots up, we
Es
are
de
directly
abajo hacia
supporting
arriba.
the people.
Estamos
It is
destinando
from the
recursos
bottom up
que son
We are
fruto del
devoting
ahorro
resources
por no permitir la corrupción,
that are the
y fruto
product
también
of savings
de la austeridad
because corruption
republicana,
is not being allowed,
porque ya no hay lujos
and
en el
this is
gobierno.
also the product of
Meanwhile, Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez noted the importance of solidarity to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, while also calling for new multilateral alternatives to address external debt restructuring. He also reiterated Argentina's sovereignty over the Malvinas, South Georgia and Sandwich Islands, including their surrounding maritime space.
En este mismo espíritu de solidaridad
In
nosotros
the same spirit of
sostenemos que la vacuna que se produzca para prevenir la enfermedad que hoy padecemos tiene que ser un bien público global, accesible a todas las naciones de una manera equitativa. Nos sumamos a la
legitimacy,
instamos a la comunidad
sustainability,
internacional
and
a continuar buscando nuevas
restructuring through a
alternativas
majority. We
multilaterales
call on the
que
international
faciliten la
community to continue
reestructuración
seeking
ordenada
new
de las
multilateral
deudas
alternatives,
y permitan
facilitating
asegurar la
orderly
mayor disponibilidad de recursos
restructuring of
para la
debt
aplicación de
and
políticas
ensuring greater
públicas para
availability of
enfrentar la
resources to
pandemia
apply public
y
policy
sostener el
to
crecimiento
respond to the pandemic
inclusivo.
and to support
Ningún
inclusive
país
growth
puede
in their territories,
quiero reafirmar
something
los
which Argentina
legítimos
has
e
never
imprescriptibles
stopped
derechos de
calling for.
soberanía
To
de la
conclude, I wish
República
to
Argentina sobre las
reaffirm
Islas
the
Malvinas,
legitimate
Georgia del
inherent
Sur,
rights of sovereignty
Sandwich del
of
Sur
the
y
Argentine
los espacios
Republic
marítimos
over the
circundantes,
Malvinas,
los
South
cuales
Georgia
forman
and South
parte
Sandwich
integrante del
Islands and
territorio
the surrounding
nacional de
maritime
Argentina, y que se
areas.
encuentran ocupados
These are an
ilegalmente
integral part
por el
of
Reino Unido
Argentina's
desde
national
hace ya
territory, and they have
más
been
de
legitimately
187 años.
occupied by the United Kingdom
Este año se
for
cumplirán
more than
55 años
187
de la
years.
resolución
This
2000.
year
And speaking before the United Nations General Debate, Russian President Vladimir Putin stressed the importance of freeing the world of barriers to trade as well as economic sanctions, and underlined Russia's will to contribute to peacefully resolving regional crises and conflicts.
In general, freeing the world trade from barriers, bans, restrictions and illegitimate sanctions would be of great help in revitalizing global growth and reducing unemployment. There are other critical items on the UN's agenda. The issues of both environmental protection and climate change should remain the focus of joint efforts. The specialised multilateral UN conventions, treaties and protocols have proved fully relevant. We are calling on all states to comply with them in good faith, particularly in working to achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Dear colleagues, I would like to underline again that Russia will make every effort to contribute to peaceful, political and diplomatic resolution of regional crises and conflicts, as well as to ensuring strategic stability. I would like to reiterate that in an interrelated, interdependent world, amid the whirlpool of international developments, we need to work together, drawing on the principles and norms of international law enshrined in the UN Charter. This is the only way for us to carry out the paramount mission of our organisation and provide a decent life for present and future generations. I wish all the peoples of our planet peace and well-being.
Speaking during a video conference with regional authorities this Tuesday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro denounced conspiracies to commit acts of violence in the lead up to the December parliamentary elections.
Maximum alert, calm and good sense in the face of any situation, maximum composure, absolute serenity and maximum confidence in combat, in the battle and in victory. That is our responsibility. There are always many elements that we handle. Firstly, from Colombia. The government of Colombia of Iván Duque is a government that works with mafias and drug trafficking in its internal policy.
And the Vice President of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, warned about threats of violence that some extreme sectors of the opposition are attempting to carry out in the country in the lead up to the parliamentary elections of December 6.
We want to alert those sectors of the opposition that continue to speculate and promote violence, and we want to take all measures to reach December 6th in peace, to arrive at December 6th in peace, so that the plans of the right wing supported by the US fail again, and so that on December 6th, the Venezuelans who want to participate in the vote and do so in a peaceful manner.
And Diosdado Cabello also denounced the instructions of US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to carry out acts of violence in Venezuela from Colombia. During a meeting of representatives of political and social movements that form part of the Great Patriotic Pole Electoral Alliance, the official noted that Venezuelan authorities and political organisation of the Venezuelan people is crucial in the struggle to prevent these plans from bearing fruit. He also noted the progress of the organisation and preparations ahead of the December 6 elections and highlighted the courage of the Venezuelan people to confront the unilateral coercive measures imposed against the country by the United States government. And the U.S. Treasury Department on Tuesday issued sanctions against 4 Venezuelan opposition politicians. It accuses of facilitating efforts by the government of Nicolas Maduro to undermine democracy in Venezuela. According to a Treasury Department statement, these individuals have acted as part of a broader scheme to manipulate the parliamentary elections of December 6 by placing control of Venezuela's opposition parties in the hands of politicians affiliated with the Maduro government. The move extends the many sanctions against Venezuelan officials to opposition members and comes as opposition forces are increasingly divided in Venezuela between those committed to participating in the elections and those that remain committed to extremist moves to topple the Maduro government with support from the United States. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has expressed concern about at least 9 acts of violence recorded in Bolivia this month as the electoral campaign ahead of the October 18th general elections intensifies. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has the story.
The United Nations agency reported that it has recorded 9 events of violence related with electoral campaigns. Most of these violent incidents are led by groups of violent civilians who follow former civic leader Luis Fernando Camacho, who had a very aggressive role in the coup in November last year. Then and now he uses the Bible and a rosary.
It is faith, and if in faith we can continue, we will get a new Bolivia. That's why I always say that we ask God to choose the best man so that he can lead this country, and I do not speak about me. He should decide, because I want him to rule this country. May we be the administrators of what he's going to do.
Camacho goes third in the electoral polls. The people most affected by the violence are the followers of the movement towards socialism, former President Evo Morales' political platforms, that remains as favorite in the polls.
They have destroyed our vehicles with stones and wood sticks. That is why we are coming here, to ask for constitutional guarantees and that Mr. Luis Fernando Camacho shows up.
It has also happened in La Guardia, in the town Primero de Mayo. It had also happened in Cochabamba. We certainly request constitutional guarantees.
The United Nations Human Rights Office indicated that the 4 political platforms that led the polls have suffered aggressions. Carlos Mesa, Citizens Community, we believe led by Fernando Camacho. The Front for the
In the framework of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Brazil's Agora of the Earth's Inhabitants and the Humanist Movement launched a campaign for the universalization of the right to a COVID-19 vaccine. From Sao Paulo, our team brings us more details in the following report.
Pharmaceutical corporations are already pre-selling COVID-19 vaccine batches to the world's richest countries, even though they are home to only 13% of the world's population.
They live a little from epidemics, as it is a movement of great gain. Of course, with patented medicines that also, in the current situation, force governments in some cases to buy. In other cases, they cannot even purchase them, and people cannot access them because of the price. But that is also a public expense, although people may get them at a lower cost when they ever get them.
Speculation on the fate of vaccines runs against the orders of the World Health Organization. The proportion of people who need to be immunized against the pathogen for the total population to be protected is 65% to 70%. Pharmaceutical companies seem to ignore the recommendations.
Science product better living conditions, but there is no neutrality. There are not just philanthropic people thinking about the good of humanity. Every announcement that the vaccine will be available in October, in January, in December means that the stock market value is exploding.
The Brazilian government has already indicated that not everyone will get a vaccine.
If they do not get the vaccine, no one can force anyone to be vaccinated.
The Agora of the Earth Inhabitants movement, linked with diverse nuclei working for a global citizenship for the common good, has launched a campaign for the universal right to health.
The United Nations should declare all on any vaccine against COVID-19 as a common good of humanity. Life is priceless. If life is priceless, it cannot be commercialized. A vaccine that will save us from virus that is deadly and has caused a pandemic cannot be commercialized.
This initiative is opposed to the appropriation of scientific discoveries on living organisms by large pharmaceutical companies and the profit that the commercialization of medicines implies.
We need to fight with all of our strength against what the people call the virus of private interest.
More than half of the COVID-19 vaccine doses to be produced have already been purchased by the US, UK, European Union, Hong Kong, Macau, Japan, Switzerland and Israel. The UN Assembly is marking 7.5 decades since it was founded with a focus on the pandemic and calling for an inclusive but also humane multilateralism.
Chinese and Indian authorities have agreed to stop sending more troops to their shared border zones and also to refrain from unilateral actions changing the situation on the ground. The announcement was made following the 6th round of commander-level military talks held on Monday. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin noted that both governments had agreed to hold the 7th round of commander-level talks as soon as possible and jointly safeguard peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. Chinese and Indian authorities have been engaged in negotiations following border clashes in Galwan Valley in June this year. At least 11 people have been killed, 1 is missing, and over 300 hectares of crops were affected in Cambodia following sudden floods unleashed by Tropical Storm Noel. According to the National Committee for Disaster Management, more than 475 people were evacuated to higher areas. The western province of Pailin is the most affected by the flooding in the country, with 40 houses, 200 metres of water channels and 500 metres of roads destroyed. Tropical Storm Noel landed near the Vietnamese city of Da Nang on September 18th, while also affecting the Philippines, Thailand and Laos. On Tuesday, police used tear gas and water cannons to break up a protest in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala, calling for an end to bloodshed in the country's Anglophone regions. Several parties, including that of opposition leader Maurice Kamto, called for peaceful marches against President Paul Biya, who's ruled the Central African country for nearly 40 years. The demonstrators called for a ceasefire and negotiations to end a long-running conflict between Anglophone separatists and security forces that has claimed more than 3,000 lives. The protesters are also seeking a reform to the electoral system. They gathered at a major intersection in a working-class district of the city, shouting slogans such as "Enough is enough" and "Paul Biya must go," before police dispersed them, making some arrests.
This is abuse. On the contrary, the state should supervise this march because it is said to be peaceful. We don't understand what is happening. What country are we living in? Young people are dying. Young people are suffering. We are fed up. It's a cry of despair, and it's time for things to stop. We have seen police pickups ambushing people. I saw a police unit pass by among others, and there are gendarmerie vehicles behind the TredeX station, where they pick up people. They infiltrate the crowd, pick protesters up, sneakily put them in a car, and then they bring them to jail.
The leader of Mali's ruling military junta, Colonel Assimi Goïta, on Tuesday urged support for French and United Nations troops in the conflict-ridden country. Speaking to reporters during a ceremony to mark 60 years of Mali's independence from France, Goïta asked Malians to support national troops as well as partner forces from France and UN peacekeepers. The long-standing presence of foreign troops in Mali, supposedly to fight against terrorists, has sparked controversy and rejection in the West African nation.
The message to the Malian people is a message of sacred union around Mali, and I ask them to support the armed forces of defense and security. This is the opportunity for me today to congratulate and encourage them for all their efforts to bring security and peace to Mali, and I also urge the Malian people to support our partner forces such as the Barkhane forces, MINUSMA and the Takuba force.
And Colonel Assimi Goïta also demanded an end to the economic sanctions imposed after last month's coup in the impoverished country. Addressing reporters during the ceremony, he said the recent nomination of a civilian as interim president meant that West African leaders had to end their trade embargo imposed following the August 18th coup that ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Now we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.